To achieve a truly egalitarian world requires that we look deeper than what we think we see.
You cannot solve anything that you do not admit exists.
Einstein said when he first came to America, we must make every effort to ensure that the past injustice, violence, and economic discrimination will be made known to the people.
Because of what we look like, the world had already assigned a place for us.
We are not personally responsible for what people who look like us did centuries ago, but we are responsible for what good or ill we do to people alive with us today. Hi, my name is Newsom Holmes. I'm a minister at Unity of the Triangle in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm here with Ana Quintana.
I'm the associate minister of this wonderful church and spiritual community.
And we're here today to talk about a book study we're beginning. We're really introducing the book. Those quotes you heard earlier, those quotes are from the book. Anna's holding it, and this book is called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. And we found it to be a great book for what's really happening right now.
It's almost like this whole pandemic period, Newsom, has opened up in each one of us in a different way, windows of things in our society and our world that we knew somehow were there, but we were not quite into really understanding or maybe experiencing the pain that some segments of our population have gone through and continue to go through.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, for me, I believe it was when George Floyd was killed that the degree of difference in the way I'm treated and the way he was treated became so poignant that I think it enraged the world, but it also pressed in upon my own mind. It's time to really look at this and see what is really going on here. Not simply like I've seen it before, but to look at it with very different, fresh eyes. It reminded us of the Matrix, which is why we said taking the red pill. Do you want to tell them that story of the Matrix there?
Well, as you know, in the Matrix, and this is something that I learned recently, I was told by Reverend Newsom, who's seen the movie 10 times, he was instead of shocked that I hadn't. But I am a very obedient person. I said, let me watch this to really see this message of artificial intelligence taking over humanity and how humanity had been trapped in this program called the Matrix, and how so many were trapped there, not even knowing they were part of a program, in comparison to somebody else who started to awake to the possibility that reality was not necessarily that. And to see the courage in him to pick that red pill and say, I want to know more. And in a way, if you think about it, isn't that what Unity and our church stands for? Our commitment to awake to some other reality, not necessarily to what we've been taught or what we have experienced as real many parts of our lives. So it's really, the way I see it, Newsom, is that we are being, it's almost like a step up into understanding the complexity of the program we have been functioning under.
Yes, I totally agree. You know, there's a very worn story of an old fish going up to two young fish and saying, how's the water? And they look at him like, what's water? We don't notice what we are too immersed in sometimes, because we're too immersed in it to see. We can't see beyond it, so it must be the way it is. This book, this book is called Caste because the author takes the issues of race and class and breaks it down according to hierarchy in the United States, comparing those hierarchy to other caste systems around the world. And one of the things it did for me was it took the R word, racism, out of it. Many people, especially people of my skin tone, when they hear the word racism, they begin to clam up and start looking for cover and don't really want to explore the conversation because it's so much shame is connected with that word. And when shame engages with the brain, it sets off a couple of chemicals that shut down the brain's ability to learn. And consequently, if you're dealing with shame, you're not learning. So the beauty of this book, in my opinion, is that it deals with the subject without any varnish. It's straight to the point, but it avoids the shame factor in the way that most discussions about racism are not able to do. So she uses the word caste. And for me, having grown up here in the South, it fits the description of what I noticed growing up and since then very well. And it makes it accessible to us. I was telling Anna that one of the things I really like about this book is that I could be educated without being embarrassed, without being shamed, without being somehow afraid I would say the wrong thing or think some thought. It's just, you see that once you're in this system, this matrix, conditioning that you've had most of your life, it may affect the way you think, even the way you act. And to some degree, it's natural that that would be so. It doesn't mean we need to keep it that way. But I felt somewhat relieved that what I had noticed in myself and in other people, could be understood in the nature of the system we were in.
I must say, Newsom, that in a way, I congratulate you for bringing something like this into our spiritual discussion, because traditionally we go for books that are, really spiritual in nature. And there was this side of me that was like, oh, wow, we're going into that. And having this admiration as to say, why not? We need to understand that truth, it's truth, and that we can't connect the truth that we know with understanding things from our world that we might have accepted in many ways and that we are so ready to liberate ourselves from. And I can't but help think of Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, who did speak about the consciousness of the race, but it's really like the collective consciousness of humankind, and how all of us have inherited thoughts, memories, experiences, beliefs from our ancestors that are second nature to the way we operate in the planet in our everyday, and that in order for us to move forward on our spiritual path, we have had to awaken from many concepts. Not every inherited concept we have acquired is bad, but the deeper we go, the more we realize it's like, for instance, the idea of scarcity, that there's not enough. That's not true. We might have been brought up in an environment where we have seen scarcity or poverty conscious, but as we move forward into our spiritual evolution, we realize that the nature of the universe is complete abundance. Or we might have seen, we have given extra power to maybe a physical condition to realize that in truth we are whole, and we are, in a somewhat divine perfection. So to me, this is like another opportunity to say, what else it's in me that I might not have seen before that is just ready to be dissolved.
Amen. I think that's a grand way to go about it, because we are this is the community that has decided to awaken, and there are many awakenings. Some of them start out a little bumpy, like the truth will set you free, but first it will whip your hiney. I mean, it's often true. It's difficult. I'm really hopeful that as we read this and as we begin to see how some of our people have suffered and continue to suffer, that one of the things that will develop in all of us is a deeper understanding of each other, but also a sense of compassion and a willingness to step out and be a companion on their journey, even though their journey has been quite different than ours, and make a true effort to change things.
And I don't know if it's happened to you, and we're aware that it's a big book, but don't worry if we're gonna be like picking and choosing parts of the book that are really worth like spending time on. I don't know if you have felt this way, Nusum, but as you hear stories, and there's a side of me that gets hopeless in terms of why have we acted this way? Why has our divine nature been so asleep, And then I see myself going and thinking, but you can't stay there. You have to come back to principle, stand on the truth of what we know, that we are indeed one, that we are divine, to realize that human beings, either individually or collectively, we're doing the best we can in the level of consciousness we're operating in. But the more we advance spiritually and in consciousness, it's almost like the more hope we acquire in knowing what it's really possible. And I do hope that people in our spiritual community are willing to go into this dark story in many ways, but bring in this awareness that it doesn't have to be this way going forward.
Right. That's true. So,
yes,
Anna, I'll hold this while you read that quote about the house.
The house,
that kind of
yes.
explains what you were talking about.
Yeah. So you will see that Isabel, the author, spends a lot of time into explaining the human hierarchy of a caste and how in this type of system, presumed supremacy of one group, it's assumed over the inferiority of another, and how it's all based on ancestry and traits. And she does compare to the caste system, which I must say that I had some trouble being Spanish my first language. I kept telling Newsom the caste. And he would tell me, Ana, it's caste. Make sure you get that right. And he says, it's just like cast of a play, which is another comparison that she makes. And I was thinking, oh, is it the same way? Yes. And we both come to the conclusion that a cast with an E is the same thing as the cast of a play, because we are operating under a performance that is not necessarily true, right? When you play a character in a play, you're doing somebody else's character, not necessarily you, but you become that character. But anyways, I want to follow directions. And he wanted me to quote Isabel on the America is like an old house. We in the developed world are like homeowners who inherited a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable, loam and rock, heaving and contracting over generations, cracks patched but the deeper ruptures waved away for decades, centuries even. Many people may rightly say, I had nothing to do with how this all started. I have nothing to do with the sins of the past. My ancestors never attacked indigenous people, never owned slaves. And she says, and yes, not one of us was here when this house was built. Our immediate ancestors may have had nothing to do with it, but here we are, the current occupants of our property with stressed cracks and bowed walls and fissures built into the foundation. We are the heirs to whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars of Joyce, but they are ours to deal with ahora, now.
Yeah. So let's talk just a little bit of history before we go any further. The first African that came to the United States, the portion of this continent that the British controlled, and it was not the United States at the time, it was the first colony that the British had put on this large continent, and they it was called Jamestown, Virginia, the first permanent colony. An African slave was sold off a ship, and he worked with a man, one of the settlers, and after so many years, maybe 15 years, he was granted his freedom. His freedom also came with 250 acres, and he built a house, and he was starting to develop his own path toward independence and prosperity. And then the community got together and decided that because he was from Africa and not from England, not white, but was dark-skinned, that he could not be a citizen. And because he could not be a citizen, they felt justified in taking away his 250 acres and his house. And that was the very first colony that the English settled in this world. And it was 401 years ago that the first slave was brought to this country. So over 150 years before we became a country, we had already started this pattern of a caste system of light above dark. And we have kept it up, and it became ingrained in everything this country did to some degree throughout its history. Even in the founding of the Constitution, when our beloved Thomas Jefferson speaks of liberty in the Declaration of Independence, he basically is not talking about that for everybody. He's talking about for the dominant caste. And so we have a bit of unwinding to do. If you think about it, that slavery lasted for 250 years in this country, and we have not been a country for 250 years yet. So there's a lot of momentum toward this caste system. And I think we have minimized how ingrained and deep it is in the fabric of our structures, of our government. The book will explore more of that and more of the ways that the upper caste tried to keep the lower caste in its place. I gotta say, not all the stories are easy to read, but this is what we're dealing with. And if we do a good job of recognizing it, I think we can do a much better job in the future because we know our past.
Exactly. And as I'm hearing you, Newsom, I'm like, it's really about power. And power, you know, the human aspect of power is really the ego. Think about it, the ego just saying, I'm it.
Yeah, power, money. And yeah, so our ego vices are wrapped up in this for sure.
Yeah. And another thought that came as I'm listening to you is that principle number 2 in Unity, we talk about being the Christ, being divine. And we have accepted in many ways as another social identity that somehow is in opposite direction to our divine nature, meaning that we have been willing to adopt a mentality or a sense of identity based on this matrix, on this system, and then what it's possible to me if I am, if I belong to this group of the population with the certain traits versus this other. It's almost like, I love when she says that it's like the silence usher who decides where you're going to sit in that theater. It's like there's a pre-assigned place for you that is already dictating what is possible for you.
Yes, and don't step out of line.
Yeah,
these are your assigned
right.
seats.
That's why I love when she says when she's talking about the caste, the actual caste, she says, in this system, we cannot be ourselves.
Yeah, and we don't know it.
And we don't know it.
Yeah. So this is what we'll be doing for the next 4 weeks. We will be doing these dialogues every Friday. Each dialogue will advance some piece of the book's information. If you want to be in a book study, you definitely want to go to our website. Our website will have all the details, and so I won't mention them all here, but you can join small groups if you want to. You can be with us on Thursday at 7 o'clock at night. We'll have essentially an open class for anybody who wants to get involved. And then each Friday we'll be talking about this. We'll also have a study guide that you can pick up online. So everything will be online, unitytriangle.org. Please join us for this book study. I think, without exaggeration, this is one of the 2 main issues that have arisen in our country today, this year, this 2020. One has been, of course, the pandemic, and this other one is this persistent hierarchical system that we live in, and we need to examine it and improve it.
Isabel Wilkinson's words towards the end of the book are really impactful for me. She says, we are responsible for our ignorance or our wisdom. And just see this as an invitation to, I know it's a very delicate subject and many of us feel a little awkward, or even it touches us in a place of pain. But just be open to look into this in a different way. We are providing all of this for you, and most of all, we have one another. There's a lot of wisdom in this community, and this is the time in which we can bring it forth to support one another and really, really awake to our divine nature, because as we do, we're really helping the planet into this place of new possibilities that I know are coming forth from this period in history.
So thanks. We look forward to seeing you over the next 4 weeks, and I hope you have a beautiful day. The book is called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. See you next time.